Hi, my name is Tom Childers. Uh, this line right here between hyper-localism and National Socialism divides the chart into the table into two sides with opposite vertices of blue elitism and orange civil society. And there's like a half hemisphere here on this side, or semicircle, that is basically this like part of the political ideologies talks about regulations, and on this half over here there's like there's a lot of talk about responsibilities, and there's a I actually, as soon as I say that, I think that I may have missed the mark a little bit, but let me be more specific. The ideas of regulations as a process of managing cultures and societies through elites who take charge and make the rules is not only a concept of this idea right here, the elitism. That's its concept that a lot of people share, but the quality or the skill sets is not so much of their concern in the power spectrum, nor in the localization spectrum. But it shows back up again, and in its opposite, where in a civil society it's believed, it's widely held that those who would be best able to regulate things would regulate things, but they change the way that they use words to describe it, and they talk about responsibilities. And the idea of responsibilities in a civil society is such that you'd be responsible for things beyond that which you think that that are talked about when you're responsible. You're responsible for a broader perspective. Like you are your brother's keeper in another sense, not in a complete sense, but to a degree. And to recognize that is to understand that we are members, citizens, like fellow citizens, and that we are here together, and this is who we're here with. And so the idea of civil society where you have responsibilities, it actually applies to the responsibility of regulations, but they think of it different. They call it it's a rule of law, and it's through there's a combination of like legal infrastructure and governmental bodies, but more so the cultural institutions that don't suffer the failures that governmental bodies suffer from. It's like, if you think that something needs to be different or changed, then you shouldn't take it out, like remove it from your own powers. Like, you shouldn't make it be something that can be monopolized and taken away from your ability to do something. And so that's like the problem of statism and the trouble with tyranny that is embodied by the idea of regulations. It's right. The wishing for regulations it's an inevitability, but to consider regulations as a solution and not understanding its core thread with its with its complement, which is responsibilities, is to leave yourself without a path across in a dead zone, using that mindset, when what we need to get out of that zone is to understand that responsibilities is a synonym and antonym of regulations. Now, I want to say that this line, this axis right here, is split over this line of symmetry. That's better than axis, but they're both good. The line of symmetry is the one that I want to use here. Between regulations and responsibilities, we have a problem here because the Green Party and revolutionary forces and anarchy, they're not on the regulation or on regulation side of things, except for the extent that they are. I might get into that in a second. But also orthodoxy, sacred wisdom and tradition. They do get involved in the regulation business and game, and so even though that these are the naders of Green Party, right? The nadir of regulation and responsibility hemispheres. The line that divides them is actually more of a straight up and down, where at the border are these two sides, which is the one side that of like revolution, more of like revolt, and revolt against the status quo in a way that becomes lasting changes, and that's like the concept of anti-business environmentalism. That's like the environmentalists aren't for revolution in the sense of overturning the system. They're in the sense of revolutionize the regulations, and so they're supporting regulations, and they basically are embodying a unchecked aggression against businesses because it doesn't stop. They actually consume everything that they can create and consume, and then they become institutionalized and non-profit organizations, and they take advantage of all the other problems of society. And the bottom line is that revolution is unyielding until it yields, and its opposite, its complement, has just as many problems, but they're not the same kind of problems, and so they don't require the same kind of solutions. Because the idea of culture and values and cultural institutions and preserving that culture, and having the right to, to say it's like a good thing to be able to preserve the national identity of a nation, because it is a nation, so you should be able to preserve the national identity of the nation. And it's not so much a matter of freedom of religion, whether or not we practice the national identity that our nation was built upon, because it really, freedom of religion is really only should mean freedom for you to practice whatever religion you want, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to stop your town from teaching civic lessons that deal with God and our Creator and natural rights. That's not a right that you have, because if you don't want to learn that, that's another story. You can't circumvent the teaching of students how to be citizens. That just wouldn't count. You wouldn't count that as something that can be ruled upon. If you're offended, that's what freedom is. You have the freedom to be offended, but the luxury of nobody doing anything about it, because otherwise people would be knocking your door down and hurting you and taking your stuff, and we have a hard time remembering all that. So this idea of regulations, we get twisted and warped. They actually, most commonly, want regulations that allow them to not have to do things that they get like made to have to do. It's like the pinnacle story is they don't, basically there's two things. It's the bakery that is being legally court ordered to bake a gay wedding a cake for a couple that is calling nothing but proms, like protesting a business with a complete like nothing case, just to make a mockery of life itself. And the other thing is that they don't want legal courts to be weighing in on their neighborhoods, allowing their daughters to abort their babies. And so they don't want that. And they don't want to let go of that. And so it ends up being a bit of a problem because other people do want to be able to do that. And so it's not really, in the heart of hearts, they're not trying to weigh in so much on, I mean, yeah, they are a little bit because we all live together. But it would be a lot better if there were just some towns would just destroy themselves like Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other towns would be like, listen, we don't live like that, and we don't want to live like that, and we don't want you to want to live like that, and we don't want to let you live like that, because that's how we want to live. We want to live in a way that you live the way we want you to live, which is a way that you want to live with us and be together, you know. It's so like the arguments of the fights and then the anti-Christianity like arguments and debates, it's always like cherry picking like weird out of context like arguments, and it's a very bad understanding of how we even got to this place. And it happens because there's like these lower level arguments that we can't even recognize that we're having them. And then the people that publicly talk about it give themselves about 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, and then the other person reads their script too, and like never, you watch that for months and months and years or decades, and you won't even figure out why there's pro-life and pro-abortion, like pro-choice. The pro-choice people, they're the best at the like name game. Because pro-choice what? Like the choice to not let our kids, you know, be promiscuous and kill their babies. Like, you think that would be a viable choice? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I do know, and it is complicated, and I just respect that some people have different ways of wanting to live, and I think that it's something we need to be paying a little more closer attention to. And so I think that out of respect for we need to like shift a little bit. You know, regulations and responsibilities, their line of symmetry is actually a little bit, the dividing line is not actually a line of symmetry, but to twist it a little bit.